Like, I hope everybody understands, like, looting in a situation like this is completely unacceptable, okay? It is psychotic. Make no mistake. I guess we can talk about the looting now as well here.
For looters out here, they have already arrested nearly 24 people inside evacuation areas. The National Guard has been brought in to bolster security, and some people have gone back home to try to defend what they have left. Chris Van Cleef has that from Altadena.
The sense of loss in Altadena is hard to describe. Destruction is everywhere. And then this island of 6 seemingly untouched homes saved by Pete Villani, who stayed behind to fight back the massive firestorm.
These are all my friends. These are all, you know.
Once again, there's like 18 million people, and they've arrested, not charged, not convicted, just simply arrested under the suspicion of looting, 20 people. They say nearly 24 because the number is 20 so far. Okay? 20.
We're a family here. I love my neighbors. And it's like, you feel guilty because I survived. I couldn't save the whole block.
But even as he worked to put out hotspots, another threat emerged. Looters. He says he and a neighbor have chased off 2 groups attempting to break into the homes still standing.
What kind of person, what kind of human being would take advantage of somebody at that point? It's just like, I don't even want to say what I would do, but it's shocking.
Did you worry about your safety when you confronted the folks trying to get in that house?
No. I will say this. It would have been a bad day for them to do anything.
Do you feel like you're defending your neighborhood now?
Yep. That's why I'm here. This is why I stayed.
He's still standing watch even as the National Guard's armored vehicles are blocking evacuated neighborhoods and police are ramping up patrols.
Looting has zero tolerance. Looting or exploiting in the disaster areas will not be tolerated. Anybody caught looting or committing crimes in the affected area.
Like, I hope everybody understands, like, looting in a situation like this is completely unacceptable, okay? It is psychotic. Make no mistake, okay? Yeah, you have to be a real freak in dire circumstances to just be like, oh yeah, time for some free stuff. I'm gonna put my life at risk to go into smoldering ashes in these neighborhoods to secure like jewelry or I don't know, like a TV or something. It is completely unacceptable. Everybody understands this. My point on this, my point when I cover this stuff is not necessarily to say looting is good, you should let it happen, even though many right-wingers will hear what I'm saying and immediately say, look at Hasan, he loves theft. Okay? My point is that the media greatly overemphasizes these stories for 2 reasons. One, because it is a panic narrative of crime that people are predisposed with, that people love laser focusing on. If it bleeds, it leads. And the other reason why they do it is because this justifies the additional police presence. That way you don't think about why we're giving so much money to the cops and taking away money from firefighters. Even in a time when there is a massive wildfire, the media will always maintain this posture. Does the media portray anti-looting propaganda during hurricanes? Of course they do. Yes, they do this after every natural disaster. It's additionally crazy to do it after a wildfire, though, because like the fires are still going, it's still blazing through half of these neighborhoods when they're like, it didn't. Bro, the Pacific Palisades was still on fire when the new district attorney went to his sister's destroyed house in the Pacific Palisades to cut a video talking about how he's going to kill looters. It's like, bro, you're standing in front of your sister's burned down house, and that's what you got on your mind. You're like, oh, if you try to come here to my sister's burned down house, like, I'll freaking kill you. Looting narratives go crazy. They're protecting us from imaginary looters. Do you remember the news during Katrina? Yeah. Katrina was particularly deadly because people did actually, quote unquote, take matters in their own hands. And they just started shooting random black people under the suspicion that they were looting. But luckily, it hasn't gotten to that degree here in California, Los Angeles. Woke California hasn't started doing that yet. But of course, the more people hit these like looter lines, the more people panic about this sort of thing, the higher the likelihood that you could potentially go to jail or be detained or arrested for the crime of trying to go back to your house while also being a black person or while also being a brown person or, not looking the neighborhood profile, Yeah. The Leos in the evac zone are standing around waiting for looters with boosted funding. The firefighters bust their asses with diminished resources and reduced funding, and the slaves make $20 to work 24 hours in the trenches. Exactly. I think there is a real reason for why police and even the National Guard must create a security perimeter around these disaster zones. Okay? That I get that. You do that specifically so that you can open up pathways for emergency vehicles in times of need. You can do that, or you must do that, to ensure that random people don't go back to their houses, and then that becomes an additional problem for the emergency services to deal with because now you have to rescue people. Okay? That makes sense. You can just say that and, be perfectly fine, but they have to overemphasize the looting, okay? They have to consistently talk about how they're going to blow away any looter that even looks in the direction of a house, no matter how smoldering.
Areas will be arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
This was the view from Jonathan Esham's home Tuesday as the Eaton fire raced towards it.
Almost what I would say.
Yeah, people needed supplies to survive because National Guard couldn't reach them. It fueled people taking the law into their own hands on top of spooking cops with the rhetoric. It contributed to killings like the Danziger Bridge tragedy. This is in Katrina, the famous Danziger Bridge tragedy, where they just straight up shot like a bunch of black people under the suspicion that they were looting. I think this is dangerous and irresponsible by local and national news media to consistently heighten the tensions in times where people are already in crisis.
The surface of the sun might look like, it was just pure chaos and panic everywhere.
He evacuated, and while the fire stayed out, it appears someone tried to break in, busting out a window and trying to pry this one open.
The idea that somebody could have been in your house while you guys were evacuated.
It's horrifying. Like, I don't even want to imagine it.
A horror disgustingly man-made in the middle of this massive natural disaster. For CBS Saturday Morning, I'm Chris Van Cleve in Altadena, California.
What? Cops seem unnecessarily aggressive too? Oh, this is a YouTuber.
We're going to have to fabricate a bit of a story here to see if the cops will let us by. We're just going to say that we're going to swing by my house or what's left of it to grab my office keys if they're still surviving. That way I can actually have a place to stay for the night.
So much ash.
Are they only letting one person in at a time, or what's the story? Let me get out and talk to him.
Yeah, I was going to say.
He called for backup.
Okay.
Wow, he called for backup. Why is he putting his hand on his fucking gun?
They are telling us to go down. They're not super happy.
Oh, I gotta wait for them to go so I can turn around. I'm trying to.
Yeah, man. We're trying to do our job.
Okay, all right.
Don't drive past codes or anything else. Go.
Wow.
It does look like they're letting people walk up. They just don't want vehicles driving up the hill. So I think we're just going to park and just go by foot.
Look how good the cops are, dude. I'm so glad that they're protecting and serving. They don't want the vehicles in there. For those of you who don't know, they don't want the vehicles in there because they don't want looters. Okay. That's it. Because they think that everyone that's coming in to the neighborhood with a vehicle is not actually people like this who just want to go through the rummage through their remains, okay? But instead, that they are all up to no good. They're there for nefarious purpose. By the way, I this is like kind of sad, but the cops straight up in a matter of seconds proved the point I was making. If you're black or brown, especially so, where they're just like so gung-ho. They got their hands like just understand, your house is burned to the ground. You're there to go back to the remains to see what you can sift through, okay, in the rubble. And you are You are faced with a complete dip who was ready to kill you on the spot for no reason. Okay? They just walk up to you, hand on hip, hand on their service weapon. You're like, oh, pull out now. Turn around now. It's like, what are you doing? What's happening here? Like, what an insane situation. How are they supposed to know who's a looter and who's not? Okay, this is the problem with the initial assessment that like everyone that's trying to go back here is a looter, just so you understand. But also, they demand identification to make sure that the only people that are allowed into these areas are people that live there. But there's still obviously issues with that as well. What if you left your house in a panic and your ID is burned to a crisp? Okay, what do you do then? You just can't go back to your house? Okay. What if your address is not of your residence at this point? What do you do then? There are plenty of people who have old IDs that they never actually updated their addresses on. And this doesn't mean that like there is no looting, okay? This doesn't mean that there is no looting that occurs. Of course there is, all right? Of course, yes, there are really desperate people who do incredibly vicious things. But if your expectation is that like there's constant danger that is going to happen in the aftermath of a natural disaster that comes from your fellow man, you're going to lose your mind. The thing I wanted to point to you, the thing that I want to point out is that like the crisis will get significantly worse for people who have been impacted, because now they have a secondary crisis of tremendous amount of paperwork and the rebuilding process. Okay. And in that process, there are going to be some real looters. A lot of people look to the situation and go, oh, looters are actually going to come down and take advantage of this chaotic situation to steal the valuable possessions of people who have been fortunate enough not to be super impacted by these wildfires, that have their entire homes be burned into the ground. But the real looters are actually the predatory insurance companies that are going to do everything in their power to not pay you out, even though you gave them money, knowing full well that if the unthinkable happened, that you would be covered, okay? The real looters are going to be real estate developers, private equity that come in and look to your most vulnerable moment and offer you like below market rates for the plot of land where your home used to remain, okay? Where the remains of your home are. They're going to try to seize as much of the real estate marketplace as fast as they possibly can, okay? They're going to lowball you. This also plays along with the insurance companies, because the insurance companies are working to maximize their profits. And in a crisis like this, they're, going to only be able to do that by refusing all of your claims. And in that weak and desperate moment, you are going to have to make a very difficult decision. Do I just sell off my land instead of the tumultuous rebuilding process? The other looters are going to be the landlords, because you hopefully have a little bit of money, right, on the side. Insurance will kick in to pay your rent, for example, if you're fortunate enough. And the people that own numerous properties know that. So they will raise the price of rent. Market conditions. That is the real looting that will take place. But that looting is invisible.